Welcome to the Geek 101 Podcast, episode 224. Living with yourself and light sci-fi. Organ harvesting? Yes. Murder cloning? No. I'm Ariel Rada.
And I'm Andy Bowman.
And today we are doing a Should You Watch on Living with Yourself, and we are also discussing a subcategory of science fiction, which we have deemed light sci-fi, and we'll get into that later and define that even. But first we do have news, so Andy, why don't you start us off?
Okay, next up in the casting extravaganza that has come from Matt Reeves' The Batman, Paul Dano has been cast as the Riddler.
Yeah, so I haven't seen too much of what Paul Dano is in. Andy, can you tell us whether or not this is a good idea?
Okay, so Paul Dano was in movies like Ruby Sparks. If you've, that's actually another great one for this this discussion. He's been in Love and Mercy. He's been in Oakjaw. He's been in an amazing movie with Daniel Radcliffe called not 12 Years a Slave, Swiss Army Man.
Okay.
He's weird. He can really capture the manicness that the Riddler needs. I think this is perfect casting.
Yeah, so I do know a little bit about him, and I know primarily, I was almost said he's a creep. No, primarily he plays like antisocial creeps, and I think you can kind of twist that or adjust that or bend that and make a really interesting Riddler.
Yeah, exactly. I really think people should take a look at Ruby Sparks or Swiss Army Man to see how he can be manic and very Riddler-esque, I would say.
Mm-hmm. I do like the idea of him. Like, I love the Riddler where he's calm and he's cool and he's brilliant until Batman bests him, and then he flips and then he breaks. That's a really great thing with the Riddler.
Yeah, exactly. That's the the thing is that the Riddler is all together until he can't believe it anymore. In the Arkham games, when you're going about collecting the Riddler trophies, as you get more and more of them, it's a long side mission, but the Riddler starts to get will call you and be like, you found that. Well, you won't find them all. But he starts out so confident, and it's just this great. It's going to be great.
Yeah, so I think we're all pretty excited, or at least pretty interested, and we all should be interested in that. We do have a big trailer that dropped for I think the most famous Valiant comic book character, and that is Bloodshot. Andy, did you watch the Bloodshot trailer?
Okay, I watched about a minute and a half of it. I saw the twist that the movie is proposing, and I was like, that's interesting. I don't want to see any more. It comes out in February. I can wait.
Okay, I have a question for you. Have you seen Hardcore Henry? Okay. Spoiler alert for Hardcore Henry. I think we did a review on this podcast. It's almost literally the same plot as the Bloodshot trailer. Now, Andy, you and I both know we're not watching Bloodshot for the plot.
What? Ariel.
My only concern, not my only concern, because I don't think this will be a great movie. I think it can be very entertaining, and I hope the action's good enough. But one of my concerns was that they were just going to just have Vin Diesel be himself and not the white skin, dark eyes, red dot on his chest. But there is a quick scene where you see his pale white skin, and then I got really excited for a moment.
I do want to say the director of this movie did do one of the sequences for Love, Death, and Robots. He did Sunny's Edge.
Which one was Sunny's Edge? Is that the robot? The alien dog things? Is that one?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
Beastie Fights.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And he has done visual effects and cinematics for all of the Star Wars: The Old Republic trailers.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, it's a lot of video games. Halo Wars, Mass Effect 2, Bioshock.
I mean,
He's all these visual effect director.
if Zack Snyder can make a career out of directing music videos, then this guy has certainly earned a chance here with Bloodshot. I mean, I'm looking here at his page, at his portfolio, and there's a lot of really cool stuff. So let's hope. Honestly, if the plotting in this movie is garbage, but the action is interesting enough to make up for it, then it'll be a success.
That's right. And it comes out 2 weeks after Birds of Prey, so we're looking forward to a jam-packed 2020.
Oh yes, oh yeah. Any other news, Andy? Do we have here?
Jeff Loeb is now out of Marvel TV. He's stepping down from being the leader of that division. Makes sense since Kevin Feige is stepping in.
Yes, so Kevin Feige has been announced as, I think, Chief Creative Officer of Marvel Entertainment. What has recently come out, and I didn't know at first, it's not just film and TV and video games, it's also comic books.
Huh.
So he is the big hog in charge.
Okay. That does mean that Perlmutter is one step further away from being in charge of things, which I'm good with.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, with Marvel Entertainment, a lot of the stuff, if you're doing a visual medium, I want to have the same producer in charge of the entire thing to give a consistent feel to it. Mm-hmm. With comic books, I feel like that is much more of a compartmentalized creative. Like, I don't want my Daredevil comics to feel like my Spider-Man comics.
And I wish at this point in time, like, I wish it was more compartmentalized than it currently is.
So, yeah, that's a bit weird. Jeff Loeb, I remember people were really excited about him because of his run on things like Batman The Long Halloween, Batman Hush, Daredevil, etc. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was fun. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was really fun, and the Netflix shows kind of end up being a wash. You have some really strong contenders with Daredevil Season 1 and 3 and Jessica Jones Season 1. And there were things happening later on that they have not paid off. So, meh.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see how Kevin Feige fares in this new role. I hope we don't lose. I just hope that the comic books aren't bogged down by the MCU. We don't. I don't know. Who knows? The future of Marvel is a mystery right now. Nobody can quite predict what's going to happen. So let's just leave it at that.
Right. The comics are just going to become more social justice warrior nonsense, right, Ariel?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Diversity is like I don't like diversity. Full stop.
Right. Just like the Watchmen TV show and all the user reviews it's getting.
Yeah. So some people have asked us to cover Watchmen, and one, I am not interested in it. Mostly because I'm not. I don't quite vibe with what's his name.
Lindelof.
I mean, he has incredibly written and acted and plotted and produced things. I just don't like. I tried watching The Leftovers and I just found no interest in it whatsoever. And Lost, I dropped Lost after season 2. But I would what I would like to do is recommend that you find podcasts run by black people, specifically black women. I would say, because traditionally they are more in tune with the issues of today. Because there is a lot of um, like black American history touched on in that first episode, and their opinions in regards to what is happening and how it's happening and how the show is handling it. They'll just give you so much more value than me or Andy would be able to give you.
Yeah. I do say, Ariel, we should try doing a should you watch a few episodes in, though.
Yeah,
the first one
that's
was
different.
good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, for sure. That's different. I think than us trying to go like some shows. Like, if a show comes along and it looks great. For example, if we get another, for example, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, right? Like, I wouldn't mind doing that, like, episode by episode, like quick 15-minute things. This one, I don't feel the need quite to do that.
Yeah, I got you. Anyway, let's get on to our main topic.
Yeah. Before we do that, Andy, what is a way that the listener can support our little show?
Okay. Give us 5 stars on iTunes. Come on, guys. Just create multiple iTunes accounts, okay? If these guys can do this for the Watchmen reviews on Metacritic, you can do this for us on iTunes. So give us 5 stars on iTunes, and more importantly, though, let people know about us. Tweet about us. Really annoy us. I want to see tons of notifications.
Yeah, social media interaction and mostly word of mouth are the best way for a podcast to get listener growth. And so we rely on you listeners to share the show if you find it worth sharing.
Also, since my self-esteem is directly tied to how much social media discussion I get,
Okay.
that helps me out. My self-esteem is tied directly to our star rating. Okay, once since Mike is gone, I need to feel good about myself since I'm replacing him.
Okay, yeah, so absolutely, let's get Andy's self-esteem back up. Our friends over at Mad About Movies gave Joker a bad review, and a bunch of angry DC fanboys tried tanking their reviews on Apple iTunes. So,
well, luckily, Ariel, we won't have anything bad to say about the Joker.
Well, luckily we didn't review the movie. But yeah, so let's get into our main topic today. Let's do a quick should you watch on living with yourself. Andy, do you want to give a quick couple sentence plot summary, or do you want me to do it?
I can do it.
All right, let's go. Let's hear it.
Okay, so Paul Rudd is playing a marketing creative writer who is depressed, kind of your typical sad sack, mid-aughts indie drama protagonist, right? He's a guy who's just down on his luck. He's depressed. He's not going quite well. He has some infertility issues, and he is told to go to a very expensive spa. And when he goes to the expensive spa, he wakes up in the middle of the woods. And when he gets home, there's another version of himself at his house.
Yeah, so that is essentially it's not a horror, right? It's a dramedy.
It is not creepy at all.
No. It is okay. I guess I can go first. So I think the show is pretty smart. I think it's really slow, and slow in a good way. They really use music and pacing to make you feel emotion and tension. I think it's going to get pretty heavy in the second half, is what I am guessing. And I think it's actually really, really, I think the show does a really great job of making you want to continue to follow the lives of the people involved in the show. And I think that's one of the highest compliments I can give a show.
Right. For one thing, first of all, the the wife of Paul Rudd, is amazing. It in so many times, it's so often for a female character to be written kind of 2D, especially when the male character is not happy in life. It's easy to be like, oh, it's because his wife is nagging him constantly, or blah blah blah, and she plays a much more complex and layered character than I think women often get written as.
Yeah, there are several points in the show where I expected her to react a certain way, and instead she reacts more like a real person and not like a show character.
Do you mean women are real people, Ariel?
Oh yes, that's what I do mean, Andy. Is that women are real people, but ultimately, like if we were watching a sitcom, this woman character Kate would not be acting the way she's acting. She'd be there. The show would be presenting her in a much different way, I believe, if this was like a regular comedy sitcom.
Oh, absolutely. And that's originally I had thought that this was what it was going to be, and then I saw these reviews about how it's really good, and I gave it a shot, and it's just so unique. There's not too many 20-30 minute shows that are so dramatic.
Right. What did you think of the show overall?
Overall, this is for me right now is an A-. It's a little hard to binge, which is a bit of an issue.
Yeah, it's tough, real tough.
But also, and this is a spoiler for the first 20 minutes. It's his clone.
Yeah.
Paul Rudd has been cloned. The people who run the spa have left him for dead. Or, well, they were supposed to kill him, and they failed. Or, sorry, they call it deactivating him.
Yeah, and so the reason why we're calling this episode Light Sci-Fi is that in an actual like real world scenario where somebody is cloned and then deactivated, so to speak, like the facility does not leave anything to chance. There's no evidence left behind. There's no, none of this stuff. Like in a real world where somebody clones someone, and as a service, right? There are mistakes like this are not made.
Right? They don't. They don't bury them in a national forest because they can get in for free.
Right. If I were reading an Isaac Asimov book. With the same exact thing, like the story is incredibly different, and that's why we're calling it light sci-fi, because it's not about the science of cloning. They don't mention how it works. It's about the character Miles. We didn't mention, I think, or maybe we did, but Paul Rudd is playing the lead character of Miles, and he's his normal charming self, and in a very stretched out role that I think is he's doing very well in. But it's about this character, and it's about his relationships, and it's about his relationship with himself, right? And so that's why it's like light sci-fi. It's not this hard science-based, like it's not Ex Machina, where we're talking about Asimov's 3 laws, and how can this affect the real world, and can this pass the whatever test, I forget what it's called, Turing test, and things like that. Like it's not. It's just like, hey, what if you came home right, and there was a clone of you, and it never asks the science questions, and so we want to call it light sci-fi.
Yeah, and the show also doesn't just focus on the original Miles either. It does this really cool thing where perspective shifts. So, you follow the entire first episode from the perspective of the original Paul Rudd, and then the next episode is all from the perspective of the clone via the same amount of time.
Yeah. It's really interesting and really great.
Right. And Paul Rudd is actually able to play a character who, in these situations, you can tell them apart just based on the way that Paul Rudd moves and
body language
speaks. Yeah. It's really great, but you're still convinced that these are pretty much the same people. It's so much fun.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Let's get into like a should you watch territory for this, because I don't like, we haven't finished it because it's so emotional. Um, with
It is
mo
funny.
it is funny. There's moments of brevity, right? But it is so much like it's much more of a dramedy than I anticipated going into it. My greatest comparison to this, in terms of how it makes you feel, is something like BoJack Horseman, where I think BoJack, more than this, BoJack, you watch the first 2 episodes, 3 episodes, and you're like, oh, this is hilarious. And then when season 1 ends, you're just like, my feelings, like, and then by the time season 2 and 3 get in there, you're just like, man, this show is, it's smart, it's witty, but also it is so dark and heavy and emotional. And I don't know if I could watch all these episodes in this short amount of time. Like, that's how I feel watching Living with Yourself.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's the same thing. Like, I can't put myself through this emotional roller coaster. If you have seen the FX show Baskets, it's a lot like that as well. Baskets is more funny, starring Zach Galifianakis.
Okay.
Um, but it's just really well done, and it's very depressing. Or You're the Worst. That's another show. It is more of a comedy, but it's still about these people who are incredibly depressed and terrible people. It Yeah, this is it's very mumblecore. If people are familiar with movies like Dan in Real Life.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Um,
That I get that. I can see that.
Yeah. That's just the tone it gives. It's not what this show builds to.
Right. Because we haven't even seen it. We haven't finished it. Neither of us. Is there anything else? So we said something like BoJack, something like um, Baskets, Dan in Real Life. To me, this also reminds me of how Black Mirror makes me feel.
Yeah, I can
You know.
definitely. Well, yeah, and it does the same thing where it just introduces the technology and lets the world continue on with it. Like like Black Mirror is much more harder on the sci-fi because it's, much more ingrained into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, all right. I think if we want to do a like, we want to ask the question, like, should you watch this? To me, the answer is yes. If you can handle, if you enjoy dramedy, and if I'm not mistaken, something like, I haven't seen it, but something like Fleabag, which I would wager is more smartly written than this. But there's drama, there's emotion, there's comedy, there's quips, it's well written and well acted. Like, this reminds me of the reputation of that. Maybe not at that level. I haven't seen it. But I think that this is really, really good.
Yeah, and if you like pretty much any of the things we mention later in this episode, I would also agree with that. That you should watch it. I think if you liked Euphoria, you should probably give it a shot.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of other things, but I think it'll come out over time as
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
discuss the other options. But yeah, give it a shot. It's 20 minutes. Like, you'll know if you're interested in continuing it.
Yeah. Absolutely. If by episode 2 you're not drawn in, then it's probably not for you. Yeah. All right. Let's go into a deeper conversation in regards to light sci-fi. Andy, we talked a little bit off air. We have 2 designations for light sci-fi. We know that hard sci-fi is something like a Philip K. Dick novel or an Isaac Asimov novel, things like Minority Report or Ex Machina or I, Robot, where the science is the sun with which the galaxy of that story revolves around. Right? To me, that's hard sci-fi. It's all about the technology or the science and how the people react to it. But light sci-fi was something like Living with Yourself. I think is the thing with which everything orbits is a relationship or a like a real human interaction or a scenario, and how whatever sci-fi situation they've gotten themselves into is playing off of the relationships in the plot or in the story we're talking about.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think also that what separates light sci-fi from a normal drama or comedy is that the story would not exist without the science fiction element.
Right. You functionally cannot like have this particular story, and how a character, the characters need to be using the sci-fi or affected by it in a significant way, for us to still consider it like science fiction. But primarily, like, this is a sci-fi dramedy, not this is, Ex Machina is like, it's just a science fiction movie, right? There's no need to put a another adjective in there, another genre in it. Annihilation. What did we just talk about? What movie?
Ad Astra?
Ad Astra. Like, those are science fiction. Well, maybe not Ad Astra, but something like Annihilation and Ex Machina. Those are just science fiction movies, and I think this is a science fiction dramedy and not just sci-fi.
Right. So let's get into kind of discussing some examples that we came up with these.
Yeah, we'll do the first one because the other ones mostly you did. So we'll start with one that we both talked about, and then I'll give you a nice stretch here. About Time is the one property I think both you and I immediately thought of. About Time features a main character who can walk into a dark space, clench his fists, and travel through his own timeline. But really, you watch the movie, and the movie's not about that. It's about how he is living his life, how he views his life, how he uses that power at times to change things in his life. It's about his relationship with his father, with his sister, with his girlfriend and / wife. And it's just like this great lighthearted rom-com that's also science fiction.
Right. And the main character played beautifully by Domhnall Gleeson.
Yeah, across Rachel McAdams as his co-star.
Right, and it's just this beautiful story about really valuing life as it happens. I've when I saw it, I cried multiple times. I'm not even gonna try to hide that. And there are moments in it where you find out that it's all the men in his family can do this. So, so his father did this, and his grandfather did this, and it's
his uncle did it even.
Right.
And it's not just
there's a lot
line.
of right. There's a lot of things that are played for jokes. When you have the ability to travel in your own timeline. Yeah, there's some some Groundhog Day type humor as far as going back and fixing your mistakes, but it's more about appreciating things.
Yeah, and it's such a great emotional, like lighthearted thing. But give us some of your other light sci-fi examples.
Okay, there's this movie called Robot and Frank that stars Frank Langella. He's a very old man who, is in this a little bit in the future, and his son gives him a helper robot. To help him around the house, to help him with the problems he's having, and you find out that Frank Langella used to be a jewel thief, and with the help of this robot, he can now become a jewel thief again.
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's very funny. It's very sweet. I highly recommend it to anybody who that sounds kind of funny. Next up, we've got this movie called The One I Love, which is a lot like Living with Yourself, where a couple goes to a marriage counselor, and the marriage counselor tells them to go to the vacation at this place, and when they get to the place, they go in and there's another copy of them waiting there.
Okay.
And so it's them interacting with these two people, and it's a little bit more on the creepy side, but it's just this, oh, we get, because of this technology, we can actually talk with who we think are the ideal versions of our spouses.
Yeah, that's cool. It's very like this, like living with yourself.
Right. And another one that I think really fits this, Safety Not Guaranteed, stars also Mark Duplass, who was the husband in The One I Love. Mark Duplass plays a character who's just kind of, he's basically Paul Rudd. He's this lonely, sad sack character, and Aubrey Plaza is a journalist who is interested in an ad he put into the newspaper that says, "Hey, I need someone to travel in time with me. I've only done this once before. I need help. Your safety is not guaranteed." And so it's this movie that's about, well, does he really have a time machine? Does he not? Yeah. It's very interesting, and I really hope that the director, Colin Trevorrow, ends up going off and doing some very interesting things.
Yeah, so Colin Trevorrow, some of you may know from Jurassic World, and what's that other movie he made? Book of Henry?
Right, and getting fired from episode 9.
After Book of Henry, yeah.
Yeah. Another one that I think people will have seen or at least know, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Yeah, that one's a pretty famous one. It clicked into my head after you talked about was it The One I Love? The premise of it is a character goes on to, forget about the relationship she had with her ex-boyfriend, and then the boyfriend does it as well, and how the couple handles. I've never seen it because by the time I was old enough to to consider watching it, I was like, oh, I don't need this emotional turmoil in my life.
Yeah, it is a ride. It is probably on my top 50 favorite movies. Like, it is a good movie. I cannot recommend it enough.
But also, I don't need that emotional turmoil in my life. One of my favorite ones and one of my most favorite recent movies is Her, the Spike Jonze film starring Joaquin Phoenix. The one where
another tearjerker.
Oh, it's so good, and it's so beautiful, and it's so well shot, and it's so beautifully written. It's the story about a man who essentially falls in love with his iOS. And conceptually, that's absurd. And then they execute it in such a brilliant, emotional way. And it's talking about relationships, and it's talking about how this man is dealing and how society deals with certain types of relationships, and it's just so brilliant. And these are all like great examples of light sci-fi. And now we also wanted to kind of maybe question if light sci-fi meant lighthearted sci-fi, and something like Eternal Sunshine and Living with Yourself and Her even do not qualify for a lighthearted sci-fi.
No. Also, Ruby Sparks it's a little bit more of a fantasy, but because we talked about Paul Dano, I'll mention it. Is about a man who gets a typewriter, and he starts writing a story about this girl, and the girl comes to life.
Oh, okay.
And he can control this girl using his keyboard, and it becomes a ride. It's
interesting.
It's by the same people who did Little Miss Sunshine, so if you enjoyed that, you would definitely enjoy Ruby Sparks.
Okay. So we have a couple ones here that are more questionable. One of them that's not questionable is the recent, I think, 2014 anime movie Your Name, which was a body swap movie. a little more fantasy, like I said, but still in that same vein. It's not about right. It's not about the body swap. It's about something entirely different, and it's beautiful. It's well made. If you haven't seen it, go see it. If you don't like subtitles, too bad. 'Cause it's a great film. But here's two examples, Andy, that I think are worth discussing and may not qualify for this. The first one, let's go with the lesser known one. Why the Last Man? Have you read Why the Last Man?
Yes, I have.
Okay. I'll give the synopsis since you did Living with Yourself. Why the Last Man follows a young man named Yorick. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yorick. Yorick is essentially, as far as we know, the last male on the planet. A disease strikes the planet where no other males, even like animals, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anything with like the Y chromosome has died on planet Earth, and how the world gets thrown into turmoil, and how things are trying to survive, and functionally 49% of the population has died. It's basically the Thanos Endgame story, but very targeted. Would you put this in the light sci-fi category?
No, and here's my reasoning for that. One, they actually do end up explaining why he's the last man on Earth.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And two, I would also not consider a very similar plot, Children of Man.
You're right. I wouldn't consider that live sci-fi. You're right.
Yeah, so that's why it goes way more into the science than anything else. So yeah, that's just it.
Well, here's an example, a similar example, but I would put into light sci-fi. The Leftovers, which I mentioned earlier. It's not it's functionally very similar, but it is not at all about like the people who have disappeared. It's about the people who are left behind, and that's why I would consider it in this. It's about living with that, and how that kind of reflects itself onto real life and our lives and stuff like that. So that's something that I would consider more in that vein than something like Why the Last Man or Children of Men.
Now, because I have not seen Leftovers, is it religious though?
They'd never specify.
Okay.
To my knowledge, I don't think they. I'm pretty sure they don't like.
Yeah, I don't think they need to either.
No. Obviously, there are people in the show who believe it to be religious.
Yeah. And speaking of on the nose titles, Ariel with the Leftovers,
The Walking Dead.
The Walking Dead.
We are the Walking Dead. Gosh. So, The Walking Dead has evolved into what it tried to avoid. The TV show. I'm not talking about the comic. The Walking Dead, the show, ended up just being another zombie thing, right? A very successful zombie thing, to be sure, but just another zombie thing. But the comic book, the original story, the zombies were never the most important part of the story. It is how people would survive in this situation, the relationships they would develop, the relationships they would break, the psychology of certain tribes and the psychology of certain people. What are your thoughts on putting The Walking Dead in this category?
Okay. I think that there is not enough sci-fi and too much horror to put in this category.
Okay. I get the too much horror part. But here's the thing, right? In terms of the not enough sci-fi, like the zombie apocalypse traditionally is a very science-based happening, which is why I considered it. It's been a long time since I read the comic, and I don't feel horror reading comic books. Like I never have. just the has to do with the medium. But that is an interesting point there.
You know what I think is the actual crux here?
Go
Every
on.
other example we've given, the technology has not altered the world significantly,
Yeah.
right? And that's I think a key point here is that the world is our world. It is not significantly altered. There's not massive power dynamics. Humanity is still together. Humanity still exists.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
and that's probably what I would say is that it's when you start changing the world, you start changing people and their relationships instead of just introducing something to the world that causes changes.
Yeah. So in our imaginary genre categories we are building, we would slide The Walking Dead into into horror. Um, is there anything else about this topic, this subgenre, this subtopic that you wanted to mention?
I just think that this is almost on magical realism. I think
Yes, I was thinking about that.
uh and I think that this is one of the genres that's actually really easy to get your friends and family involved in geek culture.
Yeah, it's a gateway, so to speak.
Yeah, this is accessible. This is accessible to a lot more people. Uh, and particularly, like, look at the popularity of The Good Place.
Yeah, right. The Good Place is absolute pure sitcom, and yet it's a sitcom set in the bad place or the good place, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I think for us as geeks, it is important for us to keep in mind these kind of gateway introductions, because I'll tell you, like, I gifted my mom a copy of About Time.
Okay.
She still hasn't seen it, but because it is something that I could share with her, be like, oh, I liked this. I think whenever you get around to actually sitting down and watching it, I think you will enjoy this as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And I also think that something that separates nerds or geeks and hipsters is the willingness to share the culture and not use it as a hierarchy thing.
Like a gatekeeping.
Right. And so just keeping an eye on these kinds of things that other people could find enjoyable and kind of spreading the word is really important. Also, these are usually pretty small productions, so it's nice to kind of get those out there too.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I do like that point there. I think that's all I have to say about this topic. I think it's an interesting one. I really enjoy the use of it. I think someone like Stephen King does it really well, where he takes he takes a very he takes an example of something, right? Let's say let's say even Cujo, even though that's not sci-fi, I just can't think about it. He'll take a concept and he'll write this entire story with these people and these settings that the readers latch on to. And at the end, when you're finished reading whatever book it is, let's say Pet Cemetery or Cujo, you always come away thinking, man, that was not about the dog. Like that book I just read. That's not about the cemetery. It's about something completely different. And I think that's what has made him so successful, and that's what has made most of the things we mentioned on this list so successful.
Right. I forgot the guy's name. The guy who created Hannibal.
Thomas Harris.
Yeah, Thomas Harris often says, like, about his writing process that he just imagines the character and then kind of just lets them interact.
Yeah. You know who's a great light sci-fi writer is Kurt Vonnegut.
Yes, absolutely.
He is like the king. I can't believe we didn't think of it. He's the king of it. Nothing in his books is about the science fiction. Right. And yet many of his books use the science fiction.
Yeah, absolute. Read Cat's Cradle if you guys get a chance. Cat's Cradle is one of my favorite books of all time.
I've read Sirens of Titan and I've read Slaughterhouse 5 and I can't remember a damn thing about them. I need to reread them multiple times probably.
Yeah, yeah. All right, Ariel, should we go on to homework?
Yeah, let's do it. I can go first this time. My homework this week is I think another example of light sci-fi in a sense, and that is Starship Troopers, the novel. That book is not about outer space. It's not about starships. It's not about fighting bugs. It's about life and the military. And it's about militaristic like philosophy at times. But what's his name? Robert Heinlein, slapped on spaceships and alien bugs, and then you just market it as sci-fi. But like it is one of the, if I'm not mistaken, one of like the best examples of military life put into novel form.
Okay. All right.
Have you read it?
I have not read it.
It's good. It's brilliant at times, I think.
Okay. All right. So my homework for this week, something that I have been telling everyone that they need to watch, and I waited until now to tell Ariel. And Ariel, this will, be a great response to something very heavy. Is an anime on Hulu called Kaguya-sama: Love is War. Now,
okay.
This is a romantic comedy, and before half of the audience turns off because it's a romantic comedy, this is a
romantic comedy anime.
Oh yeah. This is one of the funniest things I have ever seen. And it does that by taking the tropes of anime as far as battle anime or fighting, and it posits two characters who are absolutely head over heels for each other, but neither one will admit to the other one that they have feelings, and that's the normal rom-com plot. The change here is that they are both trying to manipulate the other one into admitting it first. And it turns into a lot of very entertaining fight scenes, basically.
Okay.
Like in one scenario, they both know it's going to rain later that day. So they both know that if they can get the other one to share an umbrella with them, people will view them as being closer together than they actually are, and kind of move their relationship a little bit more forward. And it goes back and forth between these two, pretending that they don't have an umbrella and trying to get the other one to basically admit that they lied about not bringing the umbrella. And it's this huge mind game, and it's so funny. And there's 3 of these little mind games per episode, so you can basically just watch 6 minutes at a time, and it actually it has a narrator that tells you who won or lost each of these mind games.
Okay.
It's just so beautiful and funny and over the top, and it's just so happy. Please just give it a shot, even if you don't like anime. It's just one of the things that I guarantee that you will laugh watching it. I loved it so much.
All right, Andy, that's your homework. Can you please repeat it for us?
It's called Kaguya-sama: Love is War. For people who don't do a lot of Japanese spelling, just type in on Hulu "Love is War." It's 12 episodes long. They're 20 minutes apiece. You can binge this in a day, and you will be sorely tempted to do that.
All right. So that's our homework for this week. Andy, do we know what we're doing next week?
Oh man, I was thinking we could reveal our top 10 list.
Oh, the horror.
Yeah, scary movies.
Yeah, yeah. Let's do that. Let's do that next week. So, we will mention it. We will reveal the top 10. We will find however it is we calculate it. I'm looking forward to. I'm looking at the schedule this year. So next week's episode will be the horror movies, and of course, in regards to Halloween. The week after that, we have Terminator: Dark Fate. So I think we're finally returning to a movie review. Um,
early reviews are out, Ariel.
oh, are they?
Yeah.
The week after that is Doctor Sleep,
Mm-hmm.
and at that point, there will be a couple of weeks of Castle Rock. Andy, I don't know if you watched last season's.
I can catch up by then.
Okay. Castle Rock is an anthology series.
Okay.
So you don't need to watch season 1.
Now, the week after that, we should do The Mandalorian.
Oh, yes. We'll definitely hit that up. Disney Plus releases on the 12th. The Mandalorian might be something that we could do a week long, 30 minutes a week on our episode review.
Right. So Disney did announce their schedule for The Mandalorian. They are releasing it every Friday, but Disney Plus starts on a Tuesday. So that first week on November 12th and they will release one episode, and then November 15th they will release the next.
So after the 15th, we will give you episodes 1 and 2.
Yes.
We'll talk about 1 and 2. Yeah, perfect. Good. Okay. So before we get out of here, Andy, where can people find you online?
You can find me online on Twitter at Hebrews Pale Ale.
All right, you can find me at Dread Pirate Rada. You can find us at Geek 101 Podcast on Twitter and Facebook and Patreon. Email us geek101pod@gmail.com. That's all we have for today. Class dismissed.